Daniel had been traveling alone for weeks through empty star systems. His small ship, the Odyssey, was built for repair missions, not for comfort. He was sent by the human fleet to restore a broken communications relay on the edge of known space. The relay was important. It connected distant colonies back to the central hub. Without it, entire worlds could feel like they were cut off from the galaxy. When he arrived at the coordinates, he expected to find nothing but machinery. Instead, he discovered an entire colony planet, one that wasn't marked on any of his maps. At first, he thought it was abandoned. His ship descended into silence. From the sky, he saw broken towers, cracked streets, and buildings covered in dust. Not a single moving figure greeted him as he landed. Stepping onto the surface, Daniel felt a strange heaviness. The air was breathable, but the atmosphere carried the weight of loneliness. It was the kind of silence that made his footsteps echo, far too loud. He adjusted the strap of his toolkit and moved forward. The colony looked old, yet still standing. There were signs of life once, markets that had closed long ago, gardens now filled with weeds, playgrounds where no children played anymore. It was haunting, like walking into the memory of a city. Daniel muttered to himself, "Just fix the relay, send the report, and leave." He didn't like empty places. Too quiet, too empty. But then he heard something, a sound that didn't belong. A soft hum like a melody. His head turned sharply, scanning the street. At first he thought it was his imagination. Then from behind a fallen archway, a figure stepped out. She was not human. The girl appeared young, maybe close to his age, though it was hard to tell with her alien features. Her skin had a faint glow under the fading sun, smooth and pale like moonlight. Her eyes were large, filled with emotion, and her hair fell in long waves over her shoulders. She wore a simple white dress, though it was slightly worn, like it had seen too many lonely nights. Daniel froze. He hadn't expected anyone, let alone someone who looked almost human. His first thought was danger. His second was disbelief. She looked at him, her lips parting as if she had waited forever to speak. And then, in a soft, trembling voice, she asked, "Would you like to spend the night with me?" The words struck Daniel like a blast of cold air. He blinked, unsure if he had heard correctly. "I'm sorry, what?" Her eyes held no trick, no joke, only sadness. "Would you stay? Just for the night?" Daniel hesitated, his instincts screaming caution. He was alone on a strange planet, meeting a girl who came out of nowhere. But there was no threat in her voice, no weapon in her hands. "Only loneliness. I don't even know your name," he said carefully. She lowered her gaze, then looked back at him. "Lyra," she whispered. "My name is Lyra, and you are human." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "You know about humans?" Her lips curved into a faint, almost broken smile. "I know stories. I know voices from the stars, but I've never seen one. Until now." The silence between them was heavy. Daniel wanted to ask 100 questions. Who she was, why she was here, what had happened to this colony. But her first question lingered in his mind. She wasn't asking in the way humans sometimes meant it. She wasn't playful. She wasn't daring. She was simply desperate not to be alone. Daniel nodded slowly. "All right, I'll stay the night. But only if you tell me what happened here." Her eyes brightened slightly, as if a small spark had returned to a dying flame. She gestured for him to follow. They walked together through the broken streets, Daniel keeping a cautious hand near the small sidearm on his belt. Lyra walked with quiet steps, as if she had long ago learned to move without disturbing the silence around her. She led him to a tall tower on the edge of the city. Though cracked and weathered, it still stood proudly, reaching for the sky. Inside, the place was strange. Part home, part museum. Holograms flickered weakly from old devices showing images of people who no longer lived there. Shelves were filled with books and objects Daniel couldn't recognize. "This was my family's tower," she said softly. When the war came, they left. Everyone left. I stayed. Daniel looked around. Why stay behind? Why not go with them? Her hands touched the edge of a broken console. Dust clung to her fingers. Because I didn't believe the stories. They said humans were dangerous, cruel, too violent to ever be trusted. They were afraid. But I thought, maybe not all humans are like that. Maybe one would come one day. And if I left, I would never see them. Daniel felt a strange pull in his chest. She had waited all this time for someone like him. Not because of who he was, but because of what he was. Human. He set his toolkit on a table and sat down. So you stayed and waited for me? Her smile was fragile, almost breaking. I stayed because I was lonely, and I hoped that maybe someday a human would walk these streets. The room grew quiet again, but this time it wasn't an empty quiet. Daniel realized she hadn't asked him to stay the night out of anything strange. She simply couldn't face another night of silence, another night where no one answered her voice. He leaned back against the chair. All right, Lyra, you've got me for tonight. Tell me about your people. Tell me about this place. Her eyes lit up. For the first time, she didn't look lonely. She looked alive. And so, as the stars rose outside the tower windows, the lonely girl and the human began to talk. She told him about the colony, about the laughter that once filled these streets, about the games children played in the gardens. She told him about the songs they sang before they fled. Daniel listened, asking questions, sharing small pieces of his own life among the stars. Two strangers, from two different worlds, filling the silence together. When midnight came, Daniel realized something he hadn't in weeks. He didn't feel alone either. The morning light crept through the cracks of the old tower, spilling across, broken stone and dusty furniture. Daniel woke slowly, his back sore from the chair where he had dozed off. He blinked, disoriented for a moment, before remembering where he was. Not on his ship, not alone in space. He was in a forgotten colony with a girl who had asked him to stay. Lyra was already awake. She sat by the window, her long hair falling around her shoulders as she gazed at the city below. Her figure looked small against the wide emptiness of the streets. You're awake? She said without turning. Daniel rubbed his eyes. Barely. Do you always get up this early? Her lips curved into a faint smile. When you are the only one left, nights feel longer. I wait for morning every time. Daniel stood and stretched. The air inside the tower was cool and smelled faintly of metal and dust. His mind returned to his mission, the communications relay. He still needed to fix it. But something about Lyra, about her loneliness, kept him from rushing. He walked over to the window and stood beside her. The view stretched across the colony, empty roads, crumbling homes, gardens overtaken by weeds. The silence was endless. Tell me, Daniel said softly. How long have you been here alone? Lyra hugged her knees, her voice quiet. Years. I lost count after the first few. At first I thought my people would return. They promised they would come back for me. But the years passed and no ships arrived. Only silence. Daniel studied her face. She wasn't bitter when she spoke. Only tired, as if the weight of waiting had drained her long ago. Why didn't you leave here? He asked. Her eyes flickered toward him. Because I was afraid of leaving too. Afraid of being wrong. Afraid that if I left, I would never meet the human I hoped for. Daniel let out a slow breath. He wasn't sure how to respond. He had met many aliens before. Traders, scientists, explorers. But never someone like her. Someone who had shaped her entire life around the idea of meeting a human. To change the heavy silence, he asked, What happened to your people? You said they left because of war. Lyra nodded. The raiders came. They destroyed smaller colonies and took resources. My people were never warriors. They were builders, singers, teachers. We had no army strong enough to fight. So the council decided to abandon this world. They believed it was safer to scatter across the stars than stay and risk another attack. Her Voice grew soft. I begged my parents to let me stay. They thought I was foolish, but I refused to go. I told them I would wait for a human. They tried to convince me, but in the end, they left. Daniel frowned. So they just left you behind? It was my choice, Lyra said quickly. They didn't force me. They cried, but they respected my will. And so I stayed. Daniel felt a pang of sympathy. It was one thing, to be stranded by accident. Another to be abandoned by choice. Her loneliness wasn't just the result of fate. It was the result of her decision to cling to a hope. He crossed his arms, glancing around the tower. And what do you do all day? Living here alone can't be easy. Lyra stood and led him deeper into the tower. She showed him a room filled with glowing orbs, old memory crystals. Each orb, when touched, displayed fragments of her people's lives. Celebrations, songs, stories told by elders. I watch these when I cannot bear the silence, she explained. It reminds me that once this place was alive, that once I wasn't alone. Daniel picked up one of the orbs and activated it. A hologram appeared, showing children playing with bright ribbons in the garden. Their laughter echoed faintly, through the air. It was haunting, like hearing ghosts. He set it down carefully. That's a lot to carry alone. Lyra nodded. But now you are here. For the first time, I don't feel like a shadow. Her words caught him off guard. He wasn't used to being anyone's light. He was just a repairman, traveling from one broken station to the next. Yet to her, he was more than that. Trying to shift the subject, Daniel asked, "Where's the communications relay? I need to repair it before my superiors think I've gone missing." Lyra's face dimmed slightly, as though she feared his departure. But she nodded. "It is on the edge of the city near the cliffs. I can take you there." They left the tower together, walking through streets filled with silence. Dust rose with every step. Birds, small metallic-winged creatures native to the planet, fluttered between broken roofs. The colony was both beautiful and ruined, a place frozen in time. Along the way, Daniel noticed how Lyra glanced at him often, as if still not believing he was real. Her eyes studied his every move. Finally, they reached the cliffs. The relay tower stood tall, though its base was cracked. Panels were broken, and wires hung loose. Daniel set down his toolkit and examined it with a frown. "It'll take time to fix," he muttered. "But it's possible." Lyra stood beside him. "If you repair it, will you call for your people to come?" Daniel glanced at her. "That's the idea. It's my job." Her expression faltered. "And when they come, you'll leave me." Daniel paused, unsure what to say. He didn't want to lie. "I don't know," he admitted honestly. Her shoulders slumped, and she turned away. "I understand." For a moment, Daniel watched her. She wasn't angry, just sad. Sad in a way that dug into his chest. He wanted to tell her he wouldn't abandon her, but he couldn't promise what he wasn't sure of. As he began working on the relay, tightening wires and replacing fuses, Lyra sat nearby watching the sky. "You know," Daniel said after a while, "where I come from, we don't believe in giving up. Humans, we fight even when the odds are against us. That's probably why your people were afraid of us." Lyra tilted her head. "They said you were violent." "Sometimes, yes," Daniel admitted. "But sometimes, being stubborn and fighting back is the only way to survive." She looked thoughtful. "Then maybe I need to learn from you." Their conversation was cut short by a sudden sound. Daniel froze, tools still in his hands. A faint signal buzzed from the relay's receiver, not from his repairs, but from an outside source. He checked the panel. "That's strange. There's a signal coming in." Lyra's face turned pale. "What kind of signal?" Daniel adjusted the screen. His stomach tightened. "A ship, approaching fast." Lyra's voice trembled. "The raiders. They've returned." The buzzing signal on. The relay kept growing stronger. Daniel leaned closer to the cracked screen, his eyes narrowing as the data scrolled in broken green letters. It wasn't a friendly beacon. The frequency was sharp, rough, and carried an echo of something hostile. "A ship is entering orbit," Daniel said, his voice low. "It's not one of ours." Lyra's face drained of color. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the edge of the relay. "They've come back," she whispered. "The raiders. They always return when there is nothing left to take. They strip the ruins and then they burn." Daniel straightened, his jaw tightening. "How many are we talking about?" Her eyes were wide with fear. "A small fleet. Enough to destroy everything. They don't care what they leave behind, only destruction." Daniel muttered a curse under his breath. He had faced danger before, but always with backup, always with the safety of his fleet behind him. Now it was only him, a half-broken toolkit, and a lonely alien girl who had never fought in her life. He grabbed his pack. "Come on, we need to get back to the tower. If they're landing, we'll need cover." They hurried through the cracked streets. The air felt heavier now, as if the planet itself knew danger was coming. Above them, shadows flickered across the sky, dark shapes of ships entering atmosphere. Their engines growled like thunder. By the time Daniel and Lyra reached the tower, the first of the raiders' ships had already descended, kicking up dust as they landed in the open fields. Dark armored figures poured out, their weapons glinting in the sunlight. From the window of the tower, Daniel watched them. They were tall, brutish, and armed with advanced rifles. Their movements were practiced, cruel. They weren't explorers. They were predators. "They'll find us," Lyra whispered, pressing her back against the wall. "They always search every building. I should have left long ago." Daniel turned to her sharply. "Stop. You stayed because you believed in something, and now I'm here. I'm not leaving you." She looked at him with desperate eyes. "But what can we do against them? You're one human. I'm just me." Daniel checked his pack. A small sidearm, a few energy cells, a multi-tool, and scraps of equipment. Not much, but humans had a way of turning not much into something useful. "We fight smart," he said. "They expect ruins to be empty. They won't expect resistance. That gives us the advantage." Lyra hesitated, her voice trembling. I'm not a fighter." Daniel looked at her seriously. "Then you learn. Right now. Because if we don't stand, we won't survive the night." She swallowed hard, her hands clenching into fists. For the first time, he saw a spark in her eyes, not just fear but determination. Daniel scanned the tower. "We can use this place. Narrow hallways, high ground. They'll have numbers, but we have the element of surprise." He quickly began setting traps. Using wires from the relay parts he carried, he rigged doorways to spark when opened. He moved furniture to create choke points. He even modified his toolkit into makeshift explosives, small charges that could buy them time. Lyra followed him, watching his every move. "You turn broken things into weapons," she said softly. Daniel smirked. "That's what humans do. We survive." Outside, the raiders' voices echoed through the streets, deep and harsh. They were spreading out, searching. The sound of metal, boots striking the ground, grew closer. Daniel handed Lyra a small device, a pulse trigger. "If they come through here, press this. It'll release a shock wave, enough to stun them. Understand?" She nodded nervously, clutching it tightly. The first raider entered the street below, scanning the area with a glowing visor. He barked something in a guttural tongue, and two more followed. Their weapons gleamed as they aimed at the buildings. Daniel whispered, "Stay low." The raiders approached the tower, kicking at the doors, testing the structure. Sparks flew as they forced the first lock. The trap Daniel had set triggered. An arc of energy shot out, knocking one raider backward. He hit the ground with a heavy thud, armor sparking. The others growled and fired blindly into the hall. Bolts of energy scorched the stone walls. Daniel pulled Lyra back. "Now!" She pressed the trigger and a burst of electric shock blasted through the corridor. The two raiders convulsed and fell. Her eyes widened in shock. It worked. Daniel gave a quick grin. Told you. But more voices shouted outside. The raiders weren't retreating. They were calling reinforcements. The ground shook as heavier boots approached. Daniel's mind raced. They'll keep coming. We need to scare them off, make them think this place is too costly to attack. Lyra bit her lip, her hands shaking. I have something. Daniel looked at her sharply. What do you mean? She closed her eyes. My people. We weren't warriors, but we had gifts, energy manipulation. I never used mine. I was afraid, but maybe now. She raised her hand slowly and Daniel felt a vibration in the air. The dust in the tower stirred as a faint glow spread across her fingers. The broken lamps flickered to life. The air hummed with power. Daniel stared. You had this ability. All along? Her eyes opened, shining faintly. I didn't want to frighten you, but now, if it means survival, I will use it. Outside, the raiders charged again, their weapons fired at the tower, shaking the walls. Lyra stepped forward, her hands glowing brighter. She focused, and the air around the raiders suddenly bent. There, shots curved wildly, striking the ground instead of the tower. Then, with a sharp motion, she sent a wave of energy crashing into them, knocking several off their feet. Daniel didn't waste the chance. He fired his sidearm, precise and steady, forcing the raiders back. The fight raged for long minutes. The tower trembled with each blast, dust falling from the ceiling. But slowly, the tide shifted. The raiders, expecting easy prey, found themselves facing resistance stronger than they had imagined, a human's determination and an alien's hidden power. Finally, the leader barked an order, and the raiders began to retreat. They dragged their fallen back toward the ships, their armor scorched, their pride wounded. The roar of engines filled the air as the ships lifted off, disappearing into the sky. Silence returned. Daniel leaned against the wall, panting. His sidearm smoked, his body aching. He looked at Lyra. She stood in the middle of the room, her hands still glowing faintly, her chest rising and falling with exhaustion. You did it, he said quietly. Her voice shook. No, we did it. For the first time since he met her, Daniel saw her not as a lonely girl but as someone powerful, someone who had found her strength. Outside, the city was still broken, still empty. But inside the tower, for the first time in years, there was life. The tower still trembled from the attack. Dust fell in thin streams from cracks above, and the air smelled of smoke and scorched metal. Daniel wiped sweat from his forehead as he reloaded his sidearm. His muscles ached, but his eyes remained sharp. He knew the fight was far from over. Raiders never left so easily. Lyra leaned against the wall, her hands trembling. The glow that had filled her moments ago was fading. She had used more energy than she ever had before. Her chest rose and fell quickly, but her eyes were steady now, no longer filled with helpless fear. They will come back, Daniel said, his voice grim. They didn't expect a fight this time, but next time they'll be ready. They'll bring more weapons, maybe even heavier ships. Lyra lowered her head. I thought using my power would scare them. But you're right. They are too greedy. To leave for good. Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder. Listen, you did incredible. You saved us both. You've got more fight in you than you realize. Her lips curved faintly, though her voice wavered. You gave me courage. Alone, I would have hidden until they burned the tower down. But with you, I wanted to fight. Daniel nodded, then turned back to the window. The raiders' ship still hovered in the distance, their engines glowing faintly against the dark sky. They weren't gone. They were regrouping. He looked around the tower. They had a few traps left, some energy charges he had made from scraps, and his sidearm with limited cells. It wasn't much, but humans had always survived by making the impossible work. All right, he said firmly. If they want another fight, we'll give them one. But this time, we'll make them believe the colony is a fortress. Lyra tilted her head, curiosity flickering in her tired eyes. A fortress? With what? The tower is old. The walls are weak. Daniel smirked. Walls don't win battles. Strategy does. They worked quickly. Daniel climbed the upper levels of the tower, setting charges in the stairways to collapse them if enemies tried to climb. He dragged heavy tables to block hallways and rigged broken lanterns into light traps that would blind intruders. Lyra helped, using her energy to lift and move things that Daniel could not. As the night deepened, the city outside grew restless. The raiders lit torches and spread out again. Their voices echoed like growls in the dark. Then came the heavy sound of drums, metallic bangs that carried through the silence. They are calling more of their kind, Lyra whispered, fear returning to her voice. They will not stop. Daniel checked his weapon one last time. Then neither will we. View. First wave came just after midnight. Raiders stormed the lower floors, their weapons flashing in bursts of light. The traps Daniel had set triggered one by one. Explosions rocked the stairways, collapsing them, cutting off paths. Sparks from hidden wires shocked others, forcing them back. From above, Daniel fired with precision, each shot hitting armor joints and exposed gaps. He didn't waste a single round. Beside him, Lyra raised her hands again. The glow returned, brighter this time. She focused, and the air around the raiders rippled like water. Their rifles misfired, bolts of energy turning harmlessly aside. With a wave of her arm, she sent a shock wave that threw several off their feet. But the raiders kept coming. Their numbers seemed endless. The tower shook with the force of their assault. Daniel ducked behind cover as a blast struck the wall near him. They're pushing harder, he shouted. Lyra's voice trembled, but her hands didn't stop glowing. I can hold them. For a little while. No, Daniel said sharply. He looked at her, his eyes fierce. Not alone. We do this together. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. Trust. The battle raged on. Daniel fought with grit and skill, moving through the tower like it was part of him. Every shadow, every corner, he used to his advantage. He turned broken, beams into cover, shattered stone into weapons. Lyra stood beside him, no longer hiding her gift. Her energy flowed in waves, bending the air, creating barriers of light that shielded them. She had always feared her power, but now it became her strength. The raiders grew frustrated. Their leader barked orders, his voice carrying over the chaos. They launched another heavy strike, firing concentrated blasts at the tower. The walls shook violently, cracks spreading across the stone. Lyra gasped, her hands faltering. The tower can't take much more. Daniel grabbed her wrist. Then we end this before it does. He quickly scanned the battlefield. The raiders' leader stood at the edge of the fight, commanding the others. His armor was larger, his weapon heavier. He was the heart of their assault. Daniel's mind raced. If they could strike the leader, the others might break. He leaned close to Lyra. Can you focus your power, just on one target? Her eyes widened. I've never tried. Try now, he urged. Aim for the leader. I'll cover you. She nodded, fear and determination mixing in her expression. Daniel rose from cover, firing rapidly to draw attention. Bolts of energy whizzed past him, but he didn't flinch. The raiders focused on him, giving Lyra her moment. She closed her eyes, hands glowing brighter than ever. The air vibrated, the ground trembling under her feet. Then, with a sharp cry, she released all her power in one focused wave. The energy slammed into the leader, knocking him off his feet. His armor sparked and cracked as he hit the ground with a heavy crash. The other raiders froze. Their leader struggled, tried to rise, then collapsed again. Confusion spread among them. Fear followed. Daniel shouted, his voice echoing through the broken tower. You want more? Come and get it. But none of them moved. One by one, they began to retreat, dragging their leader back toward the ships. Engines roared again, and the raiders' ships lifted off, retreating into the dark sky. The sudden silence was almost unreal. Daniel lowered his weapon slowly, his chest heaving. Lyra dropped to her knees, exhausted, her glow fading into nothing. He rushed to her side. "Hey, you all right?" She nodded weakly, her voice barely a whisper. I didn't know I could do that." Daniel gave a tired smile. "Now you do, and so do they." For a long moment they sat together in the quiet. The tower was damaged, its walls cracked, but it still stood. And so did they. Lyra looked at him, her eyes soft despite her exhaustion. "When I asked you to spend the night with me, I only meant to end my loneliness for one evening. But now, you've given me more than that. You gave me courage." Daniel met her gaze. "And you gave me hope. That maybe humans and your people aren't so different after all." Outside, the first light of dawn touched the sky. The long night was over, but a new bond had been forged in its place. The sun rose slowly over the broken colony, washing the ruins in pale gold light. For the first time in years, the city felt alive again, not because its people had returned, but because it had endured another night. Smoke still curled from shattered stone, and broken weapons littered the streets. The raiders were gone. The silence they left behind was not empty, it was victorious. Inside the tower, Daniel sat near the window, his weapon resting across his lap. His eyes burned with exhaustion, but he remained alert. He had learned long ago that enemies often returned when you thought the battle was finished. Still, as the minutes passed and the sky grew brighter, he allowed himself to relax. Lyra stirred from where she lay. She had collapsed from the strain of her power, but now her eyes fluttered open. She looked pale but alive. "You stayed awake," she murmured. Daniel smiled faintly. "Old habit. Hard to sleep when trouble might come back." She pushed herself, up slowly, brushing dust from her dress. Her body ached, but her spirit felt different, lighter, stronger. "But they didn't return," she said softly. "No," Daniel agreed. "They won't, not soon at least. You showed them this place isn't easy prey anymore. That makes them think twice." Her gaze dropped to her hands. The memory of the energy she released last night still lingered. "I was afraid of this, power for so long. But when I used it with you, it didn't feel frightening, it felt right." Daniel leaned back against the wall, studying her. "That's because power by itself isn't good or bad. It's what you do with it. You used it to protect, not to harm. That makes all the difference." Silence settled between them, comfortable this time. The kind of silence that didn't ache with loneliness, but rested like a warm blanket. After a while, Daniel stood. "I need to finish fixing the relay. If I can get it working, I can send a message to my fleet." Lyra's expression dimmed. "And then you'll leave." Daniel hesitated. Her words were soft, but the pain behind them was clear. He looked at her for a long moment before answering. "Maybe. Maybe not. Let's see what happens." They left the tower together, walking back to the cliff where the relay stood. The damage looked worse in the daylight. Panels torn open, wires twisted, the antenna bent. But Daniel set to work with determination, his hands steady even as his body cried out for rest. Lyra watched him closely, sometimes handing him tools, sometimes just sitting quietly nearby. She had lived in this silence for so long, yet now it felt different. His presence filled it. After hours of work, Daniel finally tightened the last bolt and flipped the switch. The relay hummed, lights flickering across its surface. Slowly, its antenna straightened and turned toward the sky. Daniel's comm device beeped. A weak signal appeared on his wrist screen. Relief washed over him. "It's working," he said. "I can contact command now." Lyra's heart tightened. She forced a small smile. "Then you've completed your mission." Daniel looked at her, sensing the sadness she tried to hide. He turned back to his comm device, pressing the button. Static crackled, then a faint voice answered. "This is Fleet Command, identify." Daniel spoke firmly. "This is Technician Daniel Hart, ID 4457. I've repaired relay station A-19. Colony is no longer abandoned. Possible hostile presence remains in the region, requesting further orders. There was a pause, then the voice replied, "Acknowledged, technician, stand by for pickup." Daniel lowered his device slowly. Pickup. That meant leaving. He turned to Lyra. She stood very still, her hands clasped in front of her. Her eyes looked far away, as if bracing herself for another goodbye. "You'll go back to your people," she said softly. Daniel walked closer, his voice steady. "I could. But what about you? Do you want me to leave?" Her lips trembled, but she held his gaze. "I don't want you to. But I will not stop you if you must. You've given me more than I hoped for. One night with a human who listened. One night where I wasn't alone, that was enough." Daniel shook his head. "No, it's not enough, not for me." She blinked, startled. He continued, "You waited all these years, holding on to hope that one day a human would come. Well, I'm here, and I'm not just going to walk away after everything we've been through." Her breath caught. "But your duty?" "My duty brought me here," Daniel interrupted gently. "But what I choose to do now is mine alone." For a moment, Lyra could not speak. Her heart, long buried under years of loneliness, began to beat faster. Suddenly, the comm device buzzed again. "Technician Daniel, confirm status. Extraction team en route." Daniel looked at the device, then at Lyra. He pressed the button and spoke with quiet finality. "Negative. Cancel extraction. I'm staying to secure the site. Colony isn't safe yet." There was silence on the other end before the voice replied reluctantly. "Understood. Proceed at your discretion." The signal ended. Lyra's eyes widened. You stayed." Daniel smiled faintly. "Told you, I don't leave people behind." Tears filled her eyes, though she tried to hold them back. She laughed softly, the sound fragile but real. "Then maybe I was right to wait after all." The two of them stood together by the relay. The ruined colony stretching behind them, and the wide sky above. For the first time, Lyra didn't feel like the last soul of a dying world, and for the first time Daniel felt his mission was more than fixing machines. It was bringing hope where it had been lost. As the sun rose higher, Daniel sat on the edge of the cliff, gazing out at the endless horizon. Lyra sat beside him, her shoulder brushing his. She whispered, "When I asked you to spend the night with me, I only wanted one night to feel alive again. But now it seems that night has become a new beginning." Daniel looked at her, his expression warm. "Then let's see where it leads. Together." And as the wind carried their voices across the empty city, the ruins no longer felt abandoned. They felt like the start of something new. A dawn of trust. A dawn of companionship. A dawn where a lonely girl and a human chose to face the future side by side.